The sky darkened as the first wave of Jacquarn ships descended, their massive forms casting shadows over the cities below. They weren't like anything humanity had ever seen before. Sleek, oblong vessels that seemed to absorb the light around them, their hulls shimmering with a menacing glow. Across the globe, people could only watch in horror as the invaders unleashed their devastating technology. Cities that had once been beacons of human achievement crumbled within hours, reduced to ruins by plasma cannons and bombarding energy waves. In New York, the attack was swift. Massive explosions rocked the skyline as buildings disintegrated in fiery blasts. A line of resistance fighters, led by Captain Jackson Reed, moved through the chaos, trying to evacuate civilians. Reed, a hardened military leader with years of combat experience, kept his cool amidst the firestorm, barking orders into his comms. Move, get them to the underground shelters. Go, go. His eyes never left the horizon, where the alien ships loomed like death incarnate. But despite their efforts, it was clear Earth was losing. Meanwhile, Dr. Lydia Summers, a brilliant but overlooked scientist, was holed up in her laboratory, staring at the screen in disbelief. Her research on propulsion systems for deep space exploration had never seemed so irrelevant until now. Her eyes flicked between the chaotic news broadcasts and a mysterious data file she discovered days before the invasion. One marked Project Chimera. It was an old military initiative she had accidentally stumbled upon while researching for her work. The file had been classified, but she had managed to crack a portion of it. What she saw now made her blood run cold. Blueprints for an alien weapon system with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever created. But it wasn't the alien weapon that caught her attention. It was something else. Hidden deep in the file was a sequence of mathematical formulas that didn't just explain the weapon. They explained how humans could use it too. It was a technology designed to mimic Jacquarn's own, built with a combination of alien elements and human ingenuity. They had known about this. Humanity had been preparing for this invasion all along without even realizing it. Lydia's thoughts raced. She had no time to waste. The world was crumbling, but if she could figure out how to activate the project, it might give humanity a fighting chance. Across town, Jackson's squad was pinned down by alien soldiers, Jacquarn ground troops with sleek, armored suits, each wielding a weapon that melted through anything they touched. Reed's team fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered. He ducked behind a demolished building, his breath ragged as explosions continued to rock the street. "We need an exit strategy now," he shouted, but even as he spoke, a blinding light erupted in the sky, signaling the arrival of another Jacquarn assault force. In the middle of the chaos, Lydia managed to connect with Jackson over a secure military channel. "Reed, I know where we can find something that might turn the tide. Meet me at my lab. Now." Jackson hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He knew that taking a detour could be a death sentence for them all. But something about Lydia's voice, cold, determined, and desperate, told him she wasn't making an empty promise. "Understood. We're coming for you," he replied, rallying his team. As Jackson's team set off toward the scientist's lab, the ground trembled with the force of Jacquarn warships landing in the city. The battle was only beginning, and Earth's greatest weapon had yet to be revealed: humanity's unyielding will to survive. Jackson's team moved swiftly through the ruined streets of New York, weaving between wreckage and destroyed vehicles. The sounds of distant explosions reverberated through the air, a constant reminder of the threat looming over them. The city, once vibrant with life, was now a battlefield, with the Jacquarn forces moving in on every front. Yet, amidst the destruction, the team kept their focus. Lydia's lab was their only hope. Reed and his squad had grown used to the chaos, but there was an underlying tension in the air. Every step felt like it could be their last. They had lost contact with some of their allies earlier, and the casualties among civilians were mounting. If Lydia's plan didn't work, there was no telling how much longer humanity would last. Lydia, meanwhile, was already inside her lab, poring over the Project Chimera files once more. The blueprint for the weapon system was complex, involving alien tech mixed with a technology only humans could understand. It was brilliant, but also dangerous. She knew she needed to act quickly, before the Jacquard found her or her research. Just as Lydia began her calculations, the door to her lab crashed open, and Jackson's team stormed in, weapons raised. Reed was the first to enter, his face grim but determined. "You're alive," Lydia said, a faint sigh of relief escaping her lips. "You found me. I wasn't sure if you'd make it through the streets." "Had no choice," Reed replied. "You've got something for us." Lydia nodded, pulling out a small device from the lab's secure vault, a metal sphere, no bigger than a baseball. She placed it on the table in front of them, her fingers trembling as she activated it. The sphere hummed to life, and a holographic map of New York City flickered above it. The map zoomed in on key locations, Jacquard command centers, military outposts, and supply chains. "This," Lydia said, pointing to the hologram, "is Project Chimera. It's based on Jacquard technology. If we can activate it, we might be able to hack their systems and disable their command infrastructure. The problem is, the device needs a location, an energy source powerful enough to activate it." Jackson leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "We have that here." "Not exactly," Lydia replied, glancing nervously at the map. "There's a facility in the heart of the city, buried beneath the Jacquard stronghold. It houses a power core that could work, but it's heavily guarded. We'd need to breach their defenses first, or we'll never get close." Reed's eyes narrowed as he studied the map, calculating the risk. "How many guards?" "Hundreds, maybe more," Lydia answered. "And they're not like anything we fought before. Jacquard soldiers are fast, lethal, and they don't hesitate to kill." A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed the information. Their objective was clear, but the odds were daunting. They could try to fight their way through, but with the enemy in control of the city, it felt like a suicide mission. Jackson took a deep breath, then made eye contact with his team. "We can't wait for reinforcements. We'll take it on ourselves. We get to that power core, and we activate the device. If this works, we might just have a shot at crippling their command structure." Lydia's face tightened. "It's risky, Jackson. The device might not even work, or it could make things worse." "Then we die trying," Jackson said grimly, his voice unwavering. "We're fighting for everyone who's still alive." His words hung in the air like a promise, and in that moment, Lydia knew there was no turning back. She had joined this fight not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. Humanity's survival rested on her shoulders now, and with it, an unshakable truth. The fight for survival was just beginning. The team quickly gathered their gear, their resolve hardening. They didn't have the luxury of time, and every minute spent planning brought them closer to the heart of the Jacquard stronghold. They had one chance, and the stakes had never been higher. As they moved toward the facility, the sound of distant explosions grew louder, but this time they didn't falter. The fire of resistance had been lit, and it would burn bright, no matter the cost. The world had changed overnight. In the wake of the initial Jacquard assault, cities lay in ruins, governments had collapsed, and the human race found itself on the brink of extinction. But within the chaos and destruction, something else was emerging. Hope. It started with whispers, rumors of groups of survivors banding together, of defiance rising against the invaders. The world was fractured, but it had not yet been broken. Humanity's will to survive had not yet been extinguished. Jackson Reed, a former military strategist turned civilian, found himself leading one such group in the aftermath of the Jacquard's brutal occupation of North America. A small band of survivors, holed up in an old underground facility, was determined to strike back. The loss of loved ones, the obliteration of entire cities, it all weighed heavily on their shoulders. But there was something in their eyes, something that Jackson could see even in the midst of their grief. The spark of rebellion. They weren't done yet. "We can't keep hiding forever," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty around him. He paced back and forth in the dimly lit room, outlining his plan on a makeshift map of the area. "The Shekarn have weakened us, but they're not invincible. We've got intelligence on their weak points. If we strike now, while their forces are scattered and overextended, we can hit them hard." Lydia Summers, a brilliant scientist who had been working in the shadows of human resistance efforts, stood beside him. "But Jackson, we're outnumbered. And we have nothing but stolen Shekarn tech. How are we supposed to face an entire fleet?" The weight of her words echoed in the small underground bunker. Jackson knew Lydia was right. Their resources were limited, their forces untrained, and yet they had something that the Shekarn did not: the human spirit. A drive to fight back, to keep going, to never surrender. It was something alien to their invaders, a force they would soon learn to fear. "We may be small, but we're not without hope," Jackson said firmly. "I've seen what humanity can do when we're pushed to our limits. We won't be crushed. Not now." As the days passed, the resistance began to take shape. They recruited from the survivors: civilians, soldiers, engineers, scientists, and even those who had never picked up a weapon before. There was no time for formal training. Every hand that could hold a rifle or operate a piece of technology was needed. Lydia worked tirelessly with what little alien tech they had, repurposing it into makeshift weapons. Jackson coordinated guerrilla tactics, using the environment to their advantage, hitting Shekarn supply lines and communication centers. It wasn't easy. Every successful mission was met with a swift and brutal retaliation from the Shekarn, who showed no mercy in their pursuit of humanity's annihilation. But for the first time since the invasion began, the Shekarn were forced to pause, to rethink their tactics. The humans were fighting back. One of their most significant early victories came when they managed to ambush a Shekarn supply convoy. It wasn't a major battle by any means, but it was a symbolic one. The convoy was carrying vital resources for the alien war effort, and the humans managed to destroy it, crippling one of the invaders' logistical chains. The impact was immediate. It wasn't just the loss of supplies. It was the message sent across the world. Humanity was still alive. Humanity was fighting. "This is just the beginning," Jackson said after the attack. "We've shown them that they can bleed. They're not invincible, and they've made a mistake underestimating us. We've only scratched the surface, but we're going to make them pay for every life they've taken." The next phase of the plan was more ambitious. Lydia, working with a small team of scientists, had cracked a piece of alien technology they had found early on in the war, a device capable of disabling Shekarn energy shields. If they could use it against the Shekarn's most heavily fortified positions, it would give the resistance a fighting chance in larger confrontations. As the resistance expanded and their technology improved, so did their resolve. They began to organize in a way that was more than just fighting for survival. They began to fight for their future. They began to fight for Earth. And more importantly, they began to believe that victory might not just be a distant dream. It might be possible. But with every victory came more risks. The Shekarn retaliated with brutal efficiency, leveling entire cities, wiping out resistant strongholds. Their ships flew overhead, casting an ominous shadow across the earth, reminding everyone of the alien invaders' overwhelming power. Yet the human spirit was not so easily broken. Jackson and Lydia, despite the growing toll on their forces, held on to the hope that they could outlast the Shekarn, that humanity's will to survive could overcome any odds. One fateful day, Jackson received word of a breakthrough. A defector from the Shekarn ranks had contacted the resistance, offering crucial information about a Shekarn weapon, one that, if completed, could tip the balance of power forever. It was a super weapon capable of wiping out entire cities with a single shot, and it was nearing completion. "This is it," Jackson said, as the weight of the discovery settled over him. If we don't stop this weapon now, the Jacquard will have everything they need to finish us off. We need to hit them before they can deploy it. The time for small strikes was over. This would be humanity's most dangerous mission yet, an all-out assault on the heart of the Jacquard's war effort. With the information from the defector, they had a chance to destroy the weapon before it could be used. It was their best shot at winning the war, but it would come at a tremendous cost. Jackson knew that this mission could very well be their last, but they had no choice. Humanity's survival depended on it. And so the Resistance prepared for their greatest challenge yet, an assault on the Jacquard superweapon that would either end the war or seal humanity's fate. The world had barely begun to process the magnitude of the invasion when, against all odds, humanity began to fight back. Across continents, resistance movements were born from the ashes of devastated cities. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were everyday people, farmers, doctors, teachers, and engineers, coming together to form a united front. What the Jacquard had underestimated was the unshakable will of humanity to survive and protect their way of life. In Europe, a former political rival to the United States, General Martinovic, took the reins of the European resistance, quickly turning the fractured groups into a single, cohesive force. She was a no-nonsense leader, sharp and determined, and her ability to unify people from different nations was nothing short of miraculous. Her first message to the global resistance, broadcast to the world's surviving population, carried a simple but powerful message: we fight or we die. Back in New York, Jackson's team was still on the ground, reeling from their earlier successes. They had managed to disrupt a Jacquard supply chain, but they knew this was only a minor victory in the grand scheme of the war. With the Jacquard fleet still firmly in control of Earth's skies, it would take far more than guerrilla tactics to drive them off. Lydia had joined a secret meeting with the remaining leaders of Earth's military forces, where they began to map out a bold plan. Using the data from Project Chimera, they discovered something astonishing: a hidden weakness in the Jacquard superweapon, a flaw in their energy grid that could potentially disable their most destructive systems. It was a long shot, but it was humanity's best hope. "We got one shot at this," Lydia said, her voice trembling with urgency. "If we can breach their main control center and plant a disruption device, we could short-circuit their fleet's ability to communicate and coordinate. But we'll need to get inside their flagship, and that's not going to be easy." General Novik's voice crackled through the comm system, echoing with conviction. "We're with you, Dr. Summers. This is the opening we've been waiting for. But we'll need every scrap of humanity's fighting force to make this work. Prepare for a full-scale global offensive." The stakes couldn't have been higher. Across the world, humanity began to marshal their resources. The plan was set. Earth's forces would unite for a massive, coordinated strike against the Jacquard flagship, aiming to exploit the newly discovered weakness. What followed was a dizzying flurry of action: airstrikes, covert sabotage, and coordinated assaults in cities still held by the enemy. But even as hope began to rise, the Jacquard were quick to respond. Their command ships rained terror from above, targeting resistance hideouts and military bases. The death toll mounted, but it only fueled the fires of defiance. In Tokyo, a former scientist turned resistance fighter, Hideo Tanaka, had managed to reprogram Jacquard drones to turn against their masters. His actions sparked a wave of similar ingenuity, as humans used alien technology against its creators. Tanaka's work proved pivotal in the coming days, allowing the resistance to take control of strategic points in key cities, slowly tightening their grip. Back in New York, Jackson's team had joined up with a larger strike force, an international group of military veterans, hackers, and civilians. Together, they began assembling a team to infiltrate the Jacquard flagship, the heart of their operations. Their mission was simple: destroy the flagship's core systems and buy Earth's forces enough time to rally. But as the team prepared for the dangerous journey ahead, there was an unexpected twist. A group of alien refugees, survivors of previous Jacquard conquests, approached the resistance. These refugees had once been part of civilizations obliterated by the Jacquard and now sought to help humanity exact revenge. Their knowledge of Jacquard tactics and weaknesses became invaluable. One refugee, a former engineer named Varric, looked up at Jackson with eyes filled with sorrow and resolve. "You've seen what they do to entire worlds. You don't want to be the next on their list. Let us help you take them down." The alliance was born. Humanity, once divided, now stood united in its struggle for survival, with the resolve to defeat the invaders who threatened everything they held dear. As the final pieces of the plan fell into place, Lydia glanced at the holographic map, where the Jacquard flagship loomed large. The clock was ticking, but for the first time since the invasion began, she felt a spark of hope ignite deep within her. The war was far from over, but humanity had found something that the Jacquard never could have predicted. Their greatest weapon was not technology, but the unbreakable will to survive. The world was ready for the fight of its life. The assault on the Jacquard base on the moon had begun. The resistance, now stronger and more united than ever, launched a coordinated strike with precision and force. Led by Jackson Reed and Dr. Lydia Summers, a team of soldiers, scientists, and civilians from around the world descended upon the moon's surface, their destination clear: the Jacquard's primary lunar facility, where the alien forces were constructing the final components of their superweapon. The moon base was a labyrinth of high-tech fortifications and defenses, but the resistance had prepared for this moment. Armed with weapons scavenged from defeated Jacquard outposts and their own ingenuity, they infiltrated the facility under the cover of darkness. As they made their way through the facility's metallic corridors, the tension was palpable. The Jacquard's forces had been expecting them, and soon enough, alarms blared, signaling the breach. "Move fast," Jackson ordered, as the team pressed forward. They split into smaller groups to secure key points in the facility, their mission clear: sabotage the base's power core, delay the Jacquard's completion of the superweapon, and get out alive. The initial fight was brutal. Jacquard soldiers, armed with advanced energy rifles, flooded the hallways. Jackson and his team fought tooth and nail, their weapons a stark contrast to the Jacquard's alien firepower. Every shot from their guns counted. Every inch they gained was hard-won. The humans had learned quickly how to use alien technology against them, but it still wasn't enough to turn the tide completely. As Jackson moved deeper into the base, a horrifying realization dawned on him. This mission would come at a steep cost. The resistance was suffering casualties, some of them familiar faces, others strangers who had joined the fight without hesitation. As his team cleared room after room, Jackson's heart weighed heavier with each life lost. But amidst the chaos, hope was rekindled. They reached the main control center, where Lydia, using her expertise, began hacking into the Jacquard's network. "We have to disable their primary reactor. It's the only way to delay the superweapon long enough for the global forces to regroup," she said, her hand shaking but steady as she worked. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching into eternity. Then, just as the Jacquard launched a retaliatory assault to reclaim the control center, Lydia typed in the final sequence. A massive explosion echoed through the facility as the power core began to destabilize, triggering a chain reaction throughout the base. The humans had succeeded in their first major victory. The Jacquard's moon base, once a symbol of their dominance, was now a burning wreck. The explosion didn't just destroy a key Jacquard asset. It sent a clear message: humanity was no longer the helpless prey of the invaders. But victory came at a cost. As the team prepared to evacuate, the Jacquard retaliated with a devastating counteroffensive. The escape route was compromised, and the human forces were forced to fight their way out, their path littered with wreckage and fallen comrades. Jackson and Lydia barely escaped, their bodies battered and bloodied, but their spirits stronger than ever. "Lydia," Jackson panted as they made their way to the last remaining shuttle. We did it. We've given the world a chance." Lydia nodded, though her face was somber. "This is just the beginning. We've hurt them, but they won't go down easily. We need to be ready for their retaliation." As the shuttle ascended into space, the remnants of the moon base burning in the distance, the full scope of their triumph began to sink in. Humanity had struck back, and for the first time since the Jacquard invasion, Earth had a fighting chance. But with the enemy's fury sure to follow, they had no time to celebrate. Back on Earth, the ripple effect of their success was immediate. The global resistance forces, inspired by the boldness of the moon strike, began to mount a series of strategic assaults across key territories. The tide was turning. The Jacquard had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. But the victory was bittersweet. The cost of the operation weighed heavily on the survivors, and as they regrouped, they knew the next phase of the war would be even harder. The Jacquard would not let them get away with this. The final battle was still ahead, and it would test humanity's resolve like never before. As Jackson stared out the shuttle's viewport at the distant, burning moon base, he clenched his fist. The war was far from over, but humanity had shown its strength, and they wouldn't stop until the invaders were driven from their world. The battle for Earth was just beginning. The victory on the moon, though monumental, was but a spark in a long and brutal war. Humanity's victory was the symbol of hope they desperately needed, but it had also awakened the full wrath of the Jacquard. The enemy, though wounded, was far from broken. They regrouped, their relentless drive to conquer the Earth unwavering. Now, with Earth's forces rallying under a common banner, the final battle for humanity's survival loomed. On Earth, the resistance quickly shifted from small-scale sabotage to full-on war. Jackson and Lydia, weary but resolute, coordinated the global offensive from an underground command center beneath the remnants of Washington. DC leaders of the remaining human factions from every continent gathered in the shadows of the Capitol. It was here that the fate of the world would be decided. "Time's running out," Jackson said grimly, his eyes scanning a holographic map of the Earth's major cities. "The Jacquard fleet is closing in, and we can't keep playing defense forever. We need to hit them where it hurts, hard and fast." General Martin Novak, now a key leader in the United Human Front, looked up from the map with a determined gaze. "We hit them on their home turf. We need to bring the fight to their flagship." Lydia nodded, though her expression was filled with worry. "We've learned everything we can about their weapons. Their flagship is virtually impenetrable. But if we can get close enough, I have a plan to disrupt their power grid. It's risky, but if we succeed, we might cripple their entire fleet. The problem is, getting close will be nearly impossible without incurring heavy losses." "I'm not afraid of taking risks," Jackson said, his tone as steely as ever. "This is humanity's one shot. We can't sit back and wait for them to finish us off. We fight for every last inch." The gathered commanders agreed. The plan was simple: a coordinated assault on the Jacquard flagship. To execute it, they would need to pull together every resource available: fighter jets, ground forces, and even the alien technology they had scavenged. The aim was to breach the Jacquard's defenses and plant a devastating EMP device inside their flagship's core, disabling their fleet's ability to communicate and fight back. Lydia worked tirelessly, collaborating with the best minds on Earth to create the EMP device. The technology was experimental, designed to disrupt the Jacquard's advanced energy systems, but it was their best shot at dismantling the heart of their operations. With every passing day, the pressure mounted. They were building a weapon that could end the war, but could they trust it to work when it mattered most? In the midst of the preparations, unexpected help arrived. Varric, the alien refugee who had joined the resistance, offered the team a crucial piece of knowledge. The Jacquard flagship's internal systems were vulnerable to a specific type of frequency, one that the humans had inadvertently used during their earlier attacks on the moon base. With this information, Lydia was able to refine the EMP device and ensure it would have the desired effect. However, it wasn't just technology that the humans had to rely on. It was their unity, their willingness to sacrifice for each other and for their future. The resistance was made up of people from every corner of the earth, and they knew that their survival was tied to a single, unbreakable truth. They were stronger together. The night before the final assault, Jackson stood alone on the rooftop of the makeshift command center, gazing out at the stars. The weight of the upcoming battle pressed down on him, but the quiet resolve in his heart steadied his nerves. He thought about the many lives lost in this fight, lives that had come together because of one simple primal need, the need to survive. Lydia joined him, her silhouette outlined by the moonlight. "We're almost there," she said softly. "It's all been leading to this." Jackson nodded, turning to face her. "No matter what happens, we've done more than anyone could have imagined. We've shown the Jacquard that humanity's spirit can't be crushed. But it's not over yet." "It won't be easy," Lydia said, "but we have to believe it's possible. The Jacquard may have technology, but we have something they can't even comprehend. We have the will to survive. And that's what makes us dangerous." The final assault would be launched at dawn. The time had come for humanity to face its ultimate challenge. There would be no more second chances. The resistance had to win, because if they didn't, Earth would fall forever to the Jacquard. Jackson, Lydia, and their comrades had no illusions about the odds. But they also knew that if they succeeded, humanity would not only survive, they would emerge stronger than ever, forging a future built on resilience, unity, and the unbreakable will to fight. As dawn approached, Jackson gathered his team. The battle was on, and this time, Earth would give everything it had. For the first time in a long while, the sound of human footsteps marching toward destiny filled the air. Tomorrow, they would make history. The first rays of dawn pierced the sky as humanity's last chance for survival drew near. Jackson and Lydia stood side by side at the head of the resistance forces, watching as thousands of soldiers and civilians prepared for the final battle. This was no longer a fight for territory. It was a fight for existence. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and there would be no turning back. The plan was simple, but the odds were anything but. Humanity would launch a multi-pronged assault on the Jacquard flagship, a massive warship hovering just beyond the atmosphere. The flagship was heavily guarded by Jacquard fighters and shields, but the resistance had learned to adapt, using their stolen alien technology to level the playing field. It was now or never. Jackson knew that even with their best efforts, there was no guarantee of success. But there was something in his gut, something that made him believe they could win. "Ready?" Lydia's voice broke through his thoughts. Jackson looked at her, his eyes filled with unwavering resolve. "We don't have a choice." The strike force, a coalition of fighters, soldiers, and scientists, launched their attack from multiple locations, timing their movements with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Every nation had contributed its best forces, aircraft, ground troops, and elite combatants. They had one goal: to get to the Jacquard flagship, breach its outer defenses, and plant the EMP device in its core. Lydia's team had the hardest task, breaking into the ship's heart. They had managed to secure a fighter that would take them to a breach point in the flagship's hull. As they hurtled toward the ship's perimeter, the team could see the monstrous scale of the Jacquard flagship. It was a floating city of destruction, its sleek alien design an intimidating testament to the invaders' power. "Stay focused," Jackson commanded as the fighters zipped around them, weaving through enemy fire. "We make it through that breach, and we get to the core. We plant the device. That's all that matters." A hail of energy blasts rained down, striking their fighters' shields. The sound of metal screeching under pressure filled the cabin. But the crew pressed on, undeterred. "We're almost there," shouted one of the pilots. 5 seconds to breach. As the countdown ticked away, Lydia and Jackson exchanged a glance. Their mission would decide everything. If they succeeded, they could disable the Jacquard's fleet and give Earth a fighting chance to reclaim its future. If they failed, humanity would be wiped from the stars. The breach was sudden and violent. The fighters smashed through the flagship's outer defenses, entering the vast, dimly lit interior of the ship. Inside, the team quickly deployed, taking cover as enemy Jacquard soldiers rushed to intercept them. Lydia's pulse raced, but there was no time to hesitate. She led the way, hacking into the alien security system as Jackson and the others engaged in a brutal firefight with the enemy forces. Every shot from their rifles felt like it could be their last, but they pressed on, knowing that retreat was not an option. The further they advanced, the more they realized how deeply entrenched the Jacquard were in the ship's operations. The corridors were lined with alien technology, unfamiliar and complex, but Lydia had studied every detail. "This way," she shouted as they pushed forward into the heart of the flagship. They reached the central core, a vast, crystalline structure that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. This was it. Lydia quickly began to place the EMP device near the core's power conduit, her hands trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We've got company," one of the soldiers yelled. Jacquard forces were closing in fast, and they had to act quickly. Jackson stood firm, holding his position to cover Lydia as she worked. The air grew thick with tension, and the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway. They were outnumbered, but Jackson wasn't about to let them fail now. The EMP device hummed to life as Lydia secured it. "It's ready. Get back to the ship." But as they turned to retreat, a loud roar echoed through the ship. Jacquard reinforcements had arrived in full force. Jackson glanced at Lydia. They had no choice but to fight their way back. "We make it out together," Jackson said, his voice determined. With a barrage of gunfire, they began to fall back, using every scrap of alien tech they had scavenged to hold off the Jacquard. The EMP device was activated, sending a pulse of energy that rocked the flagship, causing the ship's systems to stutter and fail. The Jacquard forces faltered, their once powerful communications crumbling as their energy systems began to destabilize. "We've done it," Lydia gasped. "It's working." But victory was not yet secured. The flagship was beginning to crumble, and their escape route was closing fast. They had one shot to get back to their fighter before the ship's core exploded. The Jacquard were relentless, but Jackson and Lydia fought with everything they had, pushing forward with all the strength that humanity had left. They ran, every step filled with desperation, knowing the clock was ticking. The flagship was falling apart around them, but they kept moving, fighting through wave after wave of alien soldiers. The EMP had given them a fighting chance, but it was up to them to survive the final moments. As they reached their fighter, the flagship behind them detonated in a cataclysmic explosion. A blinding flash of light engulfed the ship's core as the Jacquard flagship was torn apart. Humanity's weapon had been used, and in the wake of the explosion, the battle had been won. Exhausted, bloodied, and bruised, Jackson and Lydia shared a single, fleeting moment of relief. They had done it. The Jacquard were wounded, their flagship destroyed. But the fight for Earth was far from over. The war had entered its final phase. The battle for the future of humanity had been won, but now, humanity would need to finish it. The explosion of the Jacquard flagship sent shockwaves across the planet, signaling humanity's greatest triumph. In the skies above Earth, the once imposing fleet of the invaders faltered. The EMP strike had crippled their ability to coordinate, disrupt their communications, and shattered their technological advantage. The Jacquard forces were now in disarray, their once feared warships drifting aimlessly in the wake of the catastrophic event. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity saw a glimmer of real hope. Jackson, Lydia, and the surviving members of their team returned to Earth, their ship battered and burned, but their spirits indomitable. The journey home was long, but there was a sense of calm that came with knowing they had dealt the invaders a blow they could not recover from. As their ship touched down in the war-torn remains of New York City, they were met with a scene unlike anything they could have imagined. The streets were filled with cheering civilians, families reunited, and soldiers embracing their comrades. It was a scene of raw, jubilant emotion. Humanity's victory, hard-earned and long-awaited. But even amidst the celebrations, the gravity of the cost was never far from their minds. The road to this moment had been paved with countless sacrifices. Thousands had fallen in the fight for survival, and Jackson could feel their absence like an ache in his chest. The faces of the fallen were never far from his thoughts. He remembered each one: the soldiers, the civilians, the fighters who had given everything for the cause. Their memory would never fade. Lydia, too, had her own private grief. In the quiet moments after the battle, when the noise of victory had quieted, she found herself reflecting on the friends she had lost, the moments that had defined them. Yet even in the face of loss, she knew that humanity had prevailed not because of their technology or weapons, but because of something the Jacquard could never understand: the strength of the human will. The world's leaders gathered in the United Nations, where a summit was held to discuss the future of Earth. The war was not over entirely, but the tide had turned. The Jacquard fleet, once unchallenged, was now scattered and in retreat. Earth's remaining forces were rallying to defend the planet from any final pockets of resistance. However, humanity now had the initiative, and they were determined to see it through. "We've won this battle, but we have a long road ahead," General Novak said in a broadcast to the global population. "The Jacquard may retreat, but we must remain vigilant. We must rebuild together. It's time to restore our world." Across the globe, efforts to rebuild began. Governments that had once been divided by petty differences now came together in a spirit of unity. The technology that humanity had captured from the Jacquard was harnessed not for conquest, but for peace. Clean energy, advanced medical technologies, and interstellar communication networks were shared with the world, giving hope to nations that had long been struggling. Jackson and Lydia stood together once more, overseeing the first steps of the rebuilding process. The resistance fighters, once underground and scattered, now took their place as leaders in the new world. There were still challenges ahead. There would always be, but humanity had shown what they were capable of. They had overcome their invaders through sheer determination, unity, and above all, a refusal to surrender. "We've saved our world," Lydia said quietly as she looked at the bustling city, now slowly coming back to life. "Not just saved it," Jackson replied, a smile crossing his face. "We've changed it. We've proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how dark the odds, humanity will always find a way to rise." They watched as children, once hidden away in the remnants of the cities, now played in the streets without fear. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it seemed full of promise. But even as humanity celebrated its victory, the universe was vast, and the Jacquard were not the only threat lurking in the stars. The war had shown that humanity, when pushed to its limits, could endure, adapt, and survive. It had awakened a new understanding of their place in the cosmos, a place not defined by fear, but by the courage to face whatever came next. And though the invasion was over, the journey for humanity had just begun. The greatest weapon humanity had was not just their ingenuity, nor their technology, nor even their soldiers on the battlefield. It was the will to survive, a force that would carry them into a new era, a new age of hope and possibility, where no force, no matter how great, could ever extinguish their spirit again. The future belonged to them, and this time they would make sure it was their own.